Ethan had traveled across many stars, exploring distant planets and experiencing wonders that many could only dream of. But nothing had prepared him for the strange twist of fate that led him to the royal planet of Alara. It was there, in a palace that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky, that his life would change forever. It started with a simple message. Ethan had received a communication from an unknown source, something he was used to as a seasoned explorer. But this one was different. The message didn't come from a distant scientist or a fellow traveler. It was from the young princess of the Alara kingdom, Lyra. She was direct and to the point. She needed him. The galaxy needed him. At first, Ethan thought it was some kind of joke, a prank from one of his old friends who knew about his adventurous reputation. But Lyra's message was clear, urgent even. She wanted him to come to Alara immediately without delay. The message spoke of her mother, Princess Zara, who was struggling to maintain peace in the galaxy. Lyra explained that her mother needed a partner, someone to help guide the kingdom and its allies, and more importantly, someone who could help shape the future of the galaxy. Ethan had heard of Princess Zara before. She was a legendary leader, known for her wisdom and strength. But she was also a woman who had carried the burden of leadership alone for years. And that's where Lyra's request came in. She needed a father figure. It was a strange request, even by Ethan's standards. A human? Marrying an alien princess to help guide an entire galaxy? He couldn't wrap his mind around it. But curiosity gnawed at him, and the idea of being part of something so significant tugged at his heart. The galaxy was in turmoil, with warlords and factions vying for power. Princess Zara, despite her intelligence and strength, was facing mounting pressure from all sides. Her kingdom was on the brink of collapse, and the galaxy's fate hung in the balance. Ethan felt a sense of duty, one that went beyond the thrill of adventure. This wasn't just about exploring unknown worlds anymore. This was about making a real difference. And maybe, just maybe, this was the kind of challenge he had been searching for. He set out immediately for Alara, taking the fastest ship he could find, knowing that time was of the essence. The journey was long, but his mind raced with questions. What kind of woman would Princess Zara be? What kind of challenge awaited him on this royal planet? And what did Lyra, this young girl who seemed so confident in her request, truly need from him? When Ethan arrived at the palace, he was struck by its sheer size and beauty. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. Towers that touched the sky, glowing lights that illuminated the planet's surface, and advanced technology that blended seamlessly with nature. The palace itself seemed alive, as though it were an extension of the people who lived within it. But beneath its stunning exterior, Ethan could feel the weight of the kingdom's troubles. Lyra met him at the entrance, her presence both commanding and innocent. She was young, no more than 16, but her eyes held a depth that belied her age. She smiled as she greeted him, but there was something in her expression, a kind of quiet desperation, that made Ethan pause. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice calm but filled with an undeniable urgency. "I know this must seem strange, but my mother, she needs your help. The galaxy needs you." Ethan nodded, trying to process everything. Lyra led him through the grand hallways of the palace, each step taking him deeper into a world he could never have imagined. She explained the situation as they walked. Her mother, Princess Zara, had been ruling for years, but the pressures of leadership were taking their toll. The galaxy was in chaos, and without a strong partner to guide her, the future was uncertain. "We need you to marry my mother," Lyra said, her words so straightforward that Ethan almost stumbled. "Together you can bring peace. You'll be able to help guide the galaxy, make decisions that will affect millions of lives. You'll be a father to me too." Ethan was taken aback. He had heard many things in his life: dangerous alien threats, strange encounters, mysterious secrets, but never had he been asked to step into a role like this. A father to an alien princess? A husband to the leader of a galaxy-spanning kingdom? He didn't know what to say. This wasn't an adventure he had signed up for. But looking into Lyra's eyes, he saw the weight of the galaxy's future resting on her small shoulders. This wasn't just a political request, it was a plea for help. Lyra, in her own way, was asking him to step up, to take on a responsibility that no one else seemed willing or able to bear. Ethan couldn't ignore it. The sense of duty that had led him to the stars now pulled him in a new direction. He didn't have all the answers, and he certainly didn't understand the full scope of what was being asked of him. But one thing was clear. This was his moment. "I'll help," Ethan finally said, his voice steady, though his mind was still reeling. "I'll help you." Here was an undeniable heaviness in the air. As they approached the throne room, Lyra stopped and turned to face him. Her expression was serious, and there was an intensity in her eyes that made Ethan pause. "My mother is not what you might expect," she said softly. "She's not just a ruler. She's a woman who's been alone for so long. She carries the weight of the galaxy on her shoulders. It's too much for one person to handle. I need her to have someone by her side." Ethan nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. He had traveled far and wide across the galaxy, but this was unlike anything he had ever encountered. To be asked to marry a princess, to become a part of a royal family, was a level of responsibility he had never imagined. But there was something, in Lyra's voice, something raw and honest, that made him want to help. They entered the throne room, and Ethan's breath caught in his throat. Princess Zara sat on a throne made of shimmering crystal, her presence commanding yet calm. Her long, dark hair flowed like a river of midnight, and her piercing blue eyes locked onto Ethan's as soon as he entered. She was beautiful, but there was something more to her, a wisdom and weariness that came from years of ruling a kingdom in turmoil. "Welcome, Ethan," she said, her voice smooth and authoritative, yet tinged with a hint of exhaustion. "I'm glad you've come. I know this is an unusual request, but the galaxy is at a crossroads. We are at war with those who seek to destroy what we've built. My people need me, but they also need someone who can help guide us into the future. Someone with a fresh perspective, someone like you." Ethan stepped forward, his heart racing. "I'm not sure I understand," he admitted. "You want me to marry you? But I'm just a human. I have no experience with politics or ruling a galaxy. I'm a traveler, not a leader." Zara's gaze softened as she rose from her throne and walked toward him. "You are more than you think, Ethan. You've seen things that many of us have never encountered. You have a unique perspective, and your ability to adapt and survive in harsh environments is something I need by my side. The galaxy is at war, and we need someone who can think outside of the box. Someone who understands what it means to fight for survival." Ethan's mind raced. He had always been the lone explorer, never interested in the politics of the galaxy. His life had been about discovery, about seeking out new worlds and experiences. But this was different. This wasn't about exploring the unknown. This was about protecting a future, about guiding an entire galaxy through a time of uncertainty. "I don't know if I can do this," Ethan said quietly. "I'm not a ruler. I'm just a man who's been to different worlds. I have no idea how to run a kingdom or help lead a galaxy." Zara smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "None of us are born rulers, Ethan. We learn, we adapt, and we grow. And in times of crisis, sometimes the best leaders are those who aren't burdened by the old ways of thinking. I've been trying to carry this burden alone for too long, but I can't do it anymore. I need you. And Lyra needs a father." Ethan looked at Lyra, who stood beside her mother with a quiet, determined expression. She was still so young, but the weight of her words had a maturity beyond her years. Lyra was right. Zara needed someone by her side, and perhaps Ethan was the one to help shoulder that burden. He took a deep breath, trying to clear his mind. This wasn't something he had prepared for, but he couldn't ignore the urgency in their voices, the desperation in Lyra's plea. "I'll do it," he said, finally making up his mind. "I'll marry you, Princess Zara. But I still don't understand what I can bring to the table. What do I offer that others can't?" Zara placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle but firm. You offer something no one else can. Hope. The galaxy has lost its way and we need a new path forward. You've seen the chaos, the destruction, the suffering. You've experienced what it means to fight for survival. That's the kind of leadership we need. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He had never considered himself a leader, but now, standing in front of Princess Zara, he realized that this wasn't about him anymore. This was about something much bigger than himself. It was about the future of the galaxy, the future of Lyra, and the future of all the people who relied on Zara's leadership. "All right," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "I'm in. I'll help you guide the galaxy." Zara nodded, her eyes meeting his with a mix of gratitude and respect. "Thank you, Ethan. Together, we can create a future where peace and prosperity are possible again." As they spoke, Lyra stepped forward, her expression softer now. "You'll be a great father," she said, her voice full of hope. "I know it." Ethan smiled at her, feeling a weight he had never experienced before settling her. He learned. The more, he realized how much was at stake. The warlord, known as Kyle, was the biggest threat to Zara's reign. His army was vast and ruthless, and he had made it clear that he wanted to claim the throne of Alara for himself. Zara's rule had been one of peace, but her enemies saw her as weak, too focused on diplomacy, too unwilling to fight. Kale, on the other hand, was all about power and control, and he didn't care who he had to destroy to get it. His rise to power had been swift, fueled by the chaos and fear he spread across the galaxy. Ethan soon found himself in meetings with Zara's advisors, each of them looking at him with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. They were not used to seeing a human in such an important position, and Ethan could feel the tension every time he entered a room. But he didn't let it shake him. He was determined to prove that he belonged. He didn't know the intricacies of galactic politics, but he understood what it meant to survive, to adapt, and that, he thought, was what the galaxy needed. Someone who could think outside the box. Zara, though initially distant, had started to open up to him more. She shared her fears and frustrations, her doubts about whether she was the right person to lead her people. She spoke of her past, of the burdens of leadership that had weighed on her for so long. Ethan could see the strain in her eyes, the exhaustion in her every word. It was clear that she had been shouldering this responsibility, alone for far too long, but now, with his support, there was a chance to change everything. One evening, as they walked through the gardens of the palace, Zara spoke to Ethan about the challenges ahead. "Kyle won't stop," she said, her voice filled with determination. "He wants more than just power. He wants to break the alliance between our people and the other planets. He wants to divide us, to make us weak. If he succeeds, there will be no stopping him." Ethan listened carefully, absorbing every word. He had seen the destruction Kale had left in his wake on other planets. He knew how dangerous the warlord was, but he also knew that the people of Alara were strong, and they had something Kale didn't: unity. The key to defeating Kale, he believed, was not just in strength, but in bringing the galaxy together. "You're right," Ethan said, his voice steady. "We can't let him divide us. But we also can't fight him with force alone. We need to show the galaxy that we're stronger together, that our alliances are unbreakable." Zara turned to look at him, her eyes searching his face. "What do you mean?" she asked. "We need to build stronger relationships with the other planets," Ethan explained. "We need to remind them of the benefits of peace, of working together. We can't just focus on defeating Kale. We need to show the galaxy that our strength comes from our unity, not from war." Zara nodded, though the doubt in her eyes didn't disappear. "That's easier said than done. The galaxy is full of factions, each with their own agendas. Some want peace, some want power. How do we convince them to stand together when they've been divided for so long?" Ethan took a deep breath. He didn't have all the answers, but he was starting to see a way forward. "We start by leading with trust. We show them that we're not just a monarchy trying to control them, but a family that understands their struggles. We show them that we care about their people as much as we care about our own." It was a simple idea, but it felt right. The more Ethan thought about it, the more convinced he became that this was the way forward. He wasn't just here to be a figurehead. He was here to help guide Zara, to help her see a new path, one that didn't rely solely on military power. As the days passed, Ethan and Zara worked together, developing a plan to strengthen their alliances. They reached out to the leaders of the neighboring planets, inviting them to Alara for a series of talks. It wasn't going to be easy. Many of the leaders were skeptical, some even openly hostile. But Ethan believed that if they could show the galaxy that Alara was not just a place of power, but a place of hope, they could convince the others to stand by their side. Lyra, too, played a part in these discussions. Though she was still young, her wisdom and insight were invaluable. She reminded Ethan and Zara of the importance of family, of trust, and of building bridges, not walls. "We can't do this alone," Lyra often said. "We need each other to survive." But not everyone was on board with Ethan's ideas. Some of Zara's advisors disagreed with his more diplomatic approach, believing that they should focus on military strength to defeat Kale once and for all. Ethan understood their concerns but believed that if they didn't try to unite the galaxy, they would risk losing everything. The pressure was mounting. Kale's forces were growing stronger by the day, and time was running out. The talks with the other planets were not going as smoothly as they had hoped. Some leaders refused to come, others demanded too much in exchange for their support. But, despite the setbacks, Ethan remained determined. He knew that if they didn't find a way to unite, they would fall into Kale's trap. One evening, after a particularly difficult meeting, Zara turned to Ethan with a weary smile. "I don't know if we can do this," she said quietly. "Maybe we're asking too much." Ethan looked at her, his resolve stronger than ever. "We'll do it," he said firmly. "We have to. For Lyra, for the galaxy, and for the future. We can't let Kale win." Zara nodded, a glimmer of hope returning to her eyes. "Then we'll keep fighting. Together." Princess Zara had been working tirelessly, meeting with the leaders of the neighboring planets and trying to secure their support. But every time they made progress, it felt like Kale was always one step ahead. His spies were everywhere, and it seemed like no matter how hard they tried to negotiate peace, the warlord was determined to bring everything to its knees. Every day the stakes grew higher, and Ethan could see the toll it was taking on Zara. She had always been strong, but the pressure was starting to wear her down. "You've been standing here for a while," Lyra's voice broke through his thoughts. She appeared at his side, her eyes still filled with the same quiet determination that had drawn him in from the beginning. "You're thinking too much." Ethan smiled softly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "I suppose I am. There's just a lot to think about, Lyra. Kale isn't going to stop, and I'm not sure we have enough time to convince everyone to join our side." Lyra looked out at the city below, her expression thoughtful. "We have to make them understand," she said softly. "We can't fight this war alone. We need unity, just like you've been saying. I know it's hard, but we can't lose hope." Ethan nodded, grateful for her optimism, but he couldn't shake the doubt swirling in his mind. The situation was growing more desperate with each passing day, and he feared they might be running out of time. "We're doing everything we can," Ethan said, his voice heavy with the weight of responsibility. "But I fear it's not enough. Kale's influence is spreading faster than we can keep up with. He's made it clear he'll stop at nothing to take control. And if we don't unite the galaxy soon, we might lose everything." Lyra turned to him, her eyes sharp and filled with a wisdom beyond her years. "That's why you're here, Ethan. Not just to fight Kale, but to help my mother see a different way. You're the one who can bring peace. You're the one who can help guide us through this." Ethan sighed, feeling the pressure of the young princess's words. He had never asked for any of this. He had been content to explore the far reaches of the galaxy, free from responsibility. But now it seemed like the fate of everything was resting on his shoulders. He wasn't sure he was strong enough to bear it. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But I'm not sure what else I can do. We've tried everything: diplomacy, alliances, peace talks. And still Kale moves forward stronger than ever. Maybe we're too late." Lyra shook her head, her expression firm. It's never too late, Ethan. As long as we have hope, we have a chance. Before Ethan could respond, they were interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps behind them. It was Zara, looking as regal and composed as always, but Ethan could see the exhaustion in her eyes. She was still standing, still fighting, but he knew she had been carrying this burden alone for far too long. "Ethan, Lyra," she said, her voice tired, but resolute. "We've received word that Kale is preparing to strike. He's gathering his forces and they're heading toward Alara. We need to act fast." Ethan's heart sank. They had hoped to buy more time, but it seemed Kale was moving faster than they had anticipated. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but they were still missing one crucial element: unity. Without it, there was no way they could stand up to the warlord and his army. "We need to rally the galaxy," Zara continued. "If we don't unite everyone now, we'll be too weak to defend ourselves. We need to show them that we're stronger together, that we can't be broken." Ethan nodded, his resolve hardening. He had come to Alara to help Zara, and now he understood that this wasn't just a political battle. It was a fight for the future of the galaxy. He had no experience in leading armies or negotiating peace, but he had seen what it meant to stand strong in the face of adversity, and he wasn't about to give up. "Pino, I agree," Ethan said, his voice steady. "But we have to act quickly. The longer we wait, the more power Kale gains. We need to show the galaxy that we're ready to fight together." Zara looked at him, her gaze filled with gratitude and something deeper, perhaps even a hint of trust that hadn't been there before. "You're right. We've been too focused on diplomacy, and Kale has taken advantage of that. We need to show them that we're ready to defend ourselves, that we're united in our cause." With newfound determination, Zara gathered her advisors and they began to put their plan into motion. They would send messages to the leaders of the neighboring planets, urging them to join the fight. They would make it clear that Kyle was a threat to everyone, and that only by standing together could they hope to defeat him. But even as the plans were set in motion, a dark shadow loomed over them all. Kyle was not a man to be underestimated. He was a master of manipulation, using fear and power to bend others to his will, and even if they managed to unite the galaxy, there was no guarantee that Kale wouldn't find a way to tear it all apart. As the hours passed, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. The galaxy's future was at stake, and it seemed like the weight of the world rested on the shoulders of a single decision. But in that moment, as he stood by Zara and Lyra, Ethan knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to give up. Not now. Not ever. They had a chance to change the course of history, and he would fight for it with everything he had. Ethan sat in the war room, a heavy silence hanging in the air as Zara, Lyra, and the rest of the royal advisors gathered around the large holographic map in front of them. The tension was palpable. The message they had received earlier that day had made it clear. Kale's forces were no longer a distant threat. They were right at their doorstep. The warlord had gathered his armies and was marching toward Alara. Time was running out. Zara looked exhausted, her eyes red from sleepless nights of strategizing and negotiating, but there was no room for weakness now. The galaxy's fate rested on her shoulders. She had to remain strong for her people and for her daughter. Ethan could see the burden she carried, and though she tried to hide it, the cracks were beginning to show. "I've sent the final messages," Zara said, her voice steady but strained. "The leaders of the neighboring planets have agreed to join us, but it's not enough. Not yet." Ethan leaned forward, focusing on the map. "What's the plan then? How do we stop Kale from destroying everything we've built?" The map flickered, showing the positions of Kale's forces, massive fleets of ships and battalions of soldiers advancing toward Alara. But there was one thing that caught Ethan's eye: a weakness, a gap in the enemy's formation. "We have one chance," Zara said, her tone fierce. "Kale is confident. He believes we're divided, that we'll fall apart the moment the fighting starts. He's underestimated us. But we can't just meet him in battle and hope for a miracle. We need to be smarter. Ethan nodded. He had always believed that the best way to win a fight was not through brute force but through strategy and cunning. So what's the move? We've trained a small elite force. We'll strike where Kale least expects it, his supply lines. If we cut him off from his reinforcements, his forces will be weakened. That's when we make our move. Ethan's mind raced as he thought through the plan. It was risky, but it was the only chance they had. If they didn't act now, Kale would take Alara, and with it, the entire galaxy would fall under his control. The alliance they had fought so hard to build would be shattered. We'll need to act quickly, Ethan said, standing up from his seat. If we don't catch Kale's forces off guard, this could be our last chance. Zara turned to him, a faint smile playing at the corners of her lips. You've been a good ally, Ethan. Your ideas have brought us this far. Ethan shrugged, trying to push away the nerves that were building inside him. I'm just doing what needs to be done. Let's make sure we finish this. Lyra, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. You've taught us all something important, Ethan. It's not about fighting for power. It's about fighting for something bigger. For the people, for the galaxy, for each other. Ethan met her gaze, feeling a weight settle in his chest. The young princess had been through so much already, and yet she still believed in the future. She was looking to him for hope, for strength. The pressure was immense, but it also made him more determined than ever to see this through. They all stood as the final preparations were made. Zara gave the command and the troops were mobilized. The next few hours would determine everything. As Ethan made his way to the hangar where their fleet was waiting, his mind was filled with a mix of dread and excitement. They were about to face a war unlike any other, one that could change the course of history. The ships were ready, sleek and powerful, designed for speed and agility. The pilots were skilled, but this mission was unlike any they had ever undertaken. They were not just fighting to defend a kingdom. They were fighting to defend the entire galaxy from Kale's tyranny. Ethan was strapped into his fighter ship, his hands gripping the controls. He was no soldier, but in this moment he felt more alive than ever. The mission ahead was clear. Disable Kale's supply lines, disrupt his forces, and buy enough time for the rest of the Alliance to mobilize and engage him in battle. As the fleet lifted off, Ethan felt a sense of camaraderie with the crew around him. They were all in this together, risking their lives for something bigger than themselves. He thought about Lyra, her unwavering belief in the future. He thought about Zara, who had given so much of herself to protect her people. And he thought about the galaxy, its beauty, its vastness, and its potential. It was a future worth fighting, for the fleet flew in formation, darting through the vastness of space, heading toward the enemy's vulnerable supply line. Ethan's heart raced as they approached their target. The countdown had begun. They would either succeed or fail, and if they failed, everything they had worked for would be lost. The first wave of attacks began as they struck the supply line, hitting the enemy with precision and speed. Explosions lit up the darkness of space, and the chaos created the opening they needed. Ethan's pulse quickened as he saw Kale's forces scramble to respond, but they were too late. The ships they had targeted were crippled, unable to send reinforcements. Ethan's ship weaved through the debris of battle, narrowly avoiding enemy fire. His heart pounded in his chest as he pushed forward, determined to complete the mission. He didn't know if it was the right thing to do, but he knew it was the only choice they had. As the enemy's supply line fell apart, Kale's forces grew disoriented, unsure of what to do next. The moment they had been waiting for had arrived. The tide was turning, but there was still more to do. Kale was far from defeated, and they would need to be ready for his counterattack. But for the first time since arriving on Alara, Ethan felt a sense of hope. They had done it. They had struck a blow against the warlord, and the galaxy's future was within their grasp. If they didn't act quickly, they would find themselves overwhelmed. The stakes had never been higher, and Ethan could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. Zara stood at the front of the room, her face a mask of focus and determination. She was a leader, not just in title but in spirit. The stress of the past few days had clearly taken its toll on her, but she refused to show weakness. She couldn't afford to. Not now. She turned to Ethan, her eyes sharp despite her exhaustion. "We've slowed him down, but he won't give up easily," Zara said. "Cale has been waiting for this moment, and now that we've struck, he'll come for us with everything he has." Ethan nodded, trying to steady his thoughts. He had seen battle before, but nothing like this. This wasn't just about survival. It was about protecting an entire galaxy from falling under the rule of a tyrant. They had disrupted Cale's supply lines, but now they had to deal with the fallout. The warlord wasn't the type to back down. He was cunning, ruthless, and willing to do whatever it took to get what he wanted. "We need to strike first," Ethan said, his voice steady. "We can't wait for him to come to us. If we do, we'll be sitting ducks." Zara turned to her advisors, her gaze sweeping over the room. The advisors were all silent, their expressions tense as they awaited her decision. It wasn't an easy choice. The alliance between the planets was fragile, and any misstep could fracture it beyond repair. But there was no time to hesitate. If they didn't act now, they might not have another chance. "Prepare the fleet," Zara ordered. "We move in an hour. Ethan, I want you leading the charge. You've proven that you can think like Cale. We'll need that if we're going to win." Ethan wasn't sure if he was ready for the responsibility, but he couldn't back down now. He had come too far. The galaxy was depending on them, and he wasn't about to let it fall apart. As the fleet prepared for the next phase of the battle, Ethan found himself standing alone for a moment, his thoughts swirling. This wasn't just about strategy or tactics. It was about hope. The galaxy had been on the brink of collapse, and now they had a chance to change the course of history. But what if they failed? What if everything they had worked for was lost in a single disastrous move? The door to the command center opened, and Lyra stepped in, her eyes filled with determination. She had been quieter in recent days, her usual optimism replaced with the weight of everything that was happening around them. Ethan had seen the toll the war was taking on her, but she was still here, still standing strong. She walked up to him, her voice low but firm. "You're not alone in this," Lyra said. "We've all come this far together. We'll win this battle, because we're united. You've helped bring us together, Ethan. You've shown us the way." Ethan gave her a small smile, though the anxiety in his chest didn't fade. "I hope you're right, Lyra. This isn't just about winning a battle, it's about saving everything we care about." Lyra nodded, her eyes unwavering. "And we will. Together." Ethan watched as she walked away, her presence a reminder of everything they were fighting for. This wasn't just about defeating Cale, it was about securing a future for the galaxy, for the people they cared about. He couldn't let them down now. The fleet was ready, and the moment had come. As they moved into position, Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it, the moment they had all been waiting for. The warlord would not get away with his tyranny. Not on their watch. Then, amidst the chaos, something changed. The communications channels crackled to life, and Zara's voice came through, steady and calm despite the madness around them. "Kyle's flagship has entered the battlefield," she said. "We need to take it down if we want to win this." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The flagship was the heart of Cale's entire operation. If they could destroy it, they could cripple his forces and turn the tide of the battle. But it wouldn't be easy. The flagship was heavily protected, and getting close to it would be a death sentence for anyone who tried. "We need to take it down now," Ethan said to his team. "Prepare for a direct assault. It's risky, but it's our only shot." With the fleet rallying behind him, Ethan led the charge toward Cale's flagship, weaving through enemy fire and dodging explosions. The closer they got, the more intense the battle became. But they couldn't stop now. They had come too far. As they closed in on the flagship, Ethan's ship was hit, and the controls jerked violently. He fought to keep it steady, feeling the strain on every nerve. But there was no turning back now. With one final, determined push, he launched the final blow that struck the heart of Cale's flagship. The explosion was massive, and the ship went up in flames. Kale's forces faltered, and the battle slowly began to shift in their favor. But even as the enemy retreated, Ethan knew this was far from over. Kale was still out there, and the war was far from finished. But in that moment, as the smoke cleared and the stars shone brightly above them, Ethan allowed himself a moment of hope. They had struck a decisive blow. The galaxy was still standing, and they still had a chance. The battle had left its mark on the galaxy. Though the warlord Kale had been defeated, the scars of the fight were still visible across the stars. Ships and debris drifted through space, and planets that had once thrived were now in ruins. But amidst the chaos, something remarkable had happened. The galaxy was still standing, and for the first time in a long while, hope felt within reach. Ethan stood with Zara and Lyra on the balcony of the palace, overlooking the city of Alara. The capital had been the heart of their kingdom, and though the war had taken its toll, the people were rebuilding. The city's lights flickered in the distance, each one a symbol of resilience. The galaxy had survived, and now they had to build something better, something lasting. Zara had changed over the course of the battle. The weight of leadership had not diminished, but the burden was shared now, and that made all the difference. Her strength, once solitary, had become a shared strength. Ethan had become more than a partner. He had become her equal. Together they were forging a future. "How do you feel?" Lyra asked, her voice soft but full of curiosity. She stood between them, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Ethan looked down at her, a faint smile on his face. I think we have a long way to go," he said, "but I've never felt more sure about anything in my life. We've won the battle, but now we have to win the peace." Zara turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "That's true," she said. "The war may be over, but the work of uniting the galaxy is just beginning. We've seen what happens when we're divided. Now we need to make sure that never happens again." Ethan nodded. "We can't afford to let old grudges divide us. If Kale had succeeded, we would have been torn apart. But now, we have a chance to build something stronger." Lyra smiled, a spark of optimism in her eyes. "And we'll build it together." The three of them stood in silence for a moment, the enormity of the task ahead settling over them. But it wasn't just a task. It was a mission. They were not only fighting for peace, but for the future of everyone across the galaxy. They were fighting for the next generation, for Lyra's future, for the future of every species, every planet, every people. They had come together at a time of chaos, and now they were going to rebuild from the ground up. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy began to heal. The leaders of the various planets, once scattered and distrustful, began to meet and share resources. There were still obstacles, still divisions to overcome, but the foundation was being laid for a new era, an era of cooperation, of unity. The alliances forged in the fires of war held strong, and even the most skeptical leaders began to see the value in working together. Ethan found himself learning more and more about leadership with each passing day. He had never wanted to be a ruler, never sought power, but now he saw that it wasn't about control. It was about responsibility. Responsibility to protect those who couldn't protect themselves, to guide those who needed direction, and to be a symbol of hope for all those who had lost it. He was no longer the lone traveler, drifting through the stars in search of adventure. He had a family now, one that extended far beyond Zara and Lyra. The galaxy itself had become his family, and every decision he made, every step he took, would impact the lives of millions. It was a heavy burden, but one he had come to accept with pride. One evening, as the sun set over Alara, Zara stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "We've come a long way," she said quietly. Ethan looked out over the city, taking in the sight of the bustling streets below. "We have," he agreed, "but there's still more to do. There are still people who need help, worlds that need rebuilding." Zara nodded, her expression resolute. "And we'll do it. Together." It wasn't just a promise. It was a commitment. The galaxy had been fractured, but now it was healing, slowly but surely. They would rebuild not just the physical structures but the relationships that had been broken. They would show the galaxy what it meant to work together, to trust one another. It would take time, but they had time now. The future was no longer in doubt. Lyra joined them, standing beside her mother and Ethan. She had grown since the beginning of the war. No longer the young girl who had asked for a father, she had become a leader in her own right. Her wisdom was beyond her years, and her belief in the future had never wavered. She had seen the best and the worst of what the galaxy had to offer, but she still believed in hope, in unity. "Do you think we'll ever be truly free of the shadows of the past?" Lyra asked, her voice thoughtful. Ethan glanced at Zara, then back at Lyra. "No," he said honestly. "The shadows will always be there, but we can choose not to let them control us. We can choose to build something new, something better." Zara placed a hand on Lyra's shoulder, her eyes filled with pride. "The future is ours to shape, and I believe we will shape it well." The stars above them seemed to shimmer brighter that night, as if the galaxy itself was offering its support. There would be more battles to fight, more challenges to overcome. But for now they had won the most important victory of all, the victory of unity. Together, they had turned the tide, and together, they would continue to lead the galaxy into a new era. And as Ethan looked at Zara and Lyra, he knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. The galaxy had survived the darkness, and now it was time for a new dawn.